MeatPad podcast serves as another conduit between academia and the meat industry through conversations with talented and brilliant meat scientists. These discussions help foster and improve communication and knowledge dissemination within the meat science community.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome to the MeatPad podcast. My name is Francisco Najar. We have a very special episode today. But before we talk about our guests, how are you, Dr. Bass? How are you today?
I'm super excited, Francisco, as usual. I've had extra coffee today. I did my stretches just because we have some amazing leaders in the meat business right now, in the meat industry. And I'm over the moon excited about this. We have Collette Kaster and Deidrea Mabry, both from the American Meat Science Association. And this is an organization that's near and dear to my heart. I'm grateful that I've been a part of it for many years now, and I've gotten a chance to work a little bit with these two, but these are some of the folks that are truly driving our organization forward and helping herd this group of cats that are meat scientists, and keeping us pointing in the right direction, keeping us working together as a group in unison. And so real quick, just I wanted to say thank you, Collette and Deidrea, for being here. And real quick also, maybe we can start off with just having you guys tell about your roles. Collette, you are the CEO of the American Meat Science Association, and Deidrea, the COO. Tell us a little bit about what those roles are and what you do with AMSA.
All right, well, I'll go first. And as the CEO, my role is to keep up with Deidrea, because if anybody knows Deidrea, she is going fast and working hard. And that's awesome. We actually make a great pair, and I think, have a really good time working together, and we work in a very similar fashion. So directionally, we kind of split up the duties, and I, try to lead from a strategic planning standpoint, working with the Development Council. Speaking of strategic planning, we are in the final stages of creating our updated strategic plan, which hadn't been done for quite a number of years. And I can say with full authority that if you ever have to do strategic planning by Zoom, I do not recommend it. So try to pick a non-pandemic year to do your strategic planning. That's just my little pointer, my helpful hint for the day. And then Deidrea really works to, everybody knows that she puts on the best RMC ever. And that's one of the main things that she does. But she also works very closely with our accounting, financial, really the detail of the organization. So she frees me up to try to kind of look forward, do a lot of outreach with sustaining partners, come up with crazy ideas, and then turn back to her and be like, okay, remind me what we said we were going to do on this. And she's just great about keeping that all going.
Yep, I don't think I have much to add. So yeah, we have a great relationship. So really excited about all the cool different things we get to do for AMSA, some of the new programs that we're going to be pushing out just based on member interest and benefits and just new outreach efforts. So it's a lot of fun. And yes, right now actively planning the 2021 RMC that we hope to see everybody in Reno.
Well, and we'll definitely get to that, because I want to make sure that all those listening out there are familiar with what that is, and that's the Reciprocal Meat Conference. And we have a number of folks that listen into the podcast and aren't connected to American Meat Science Association yet. And so what I'd like to do maybe next is, can you guys tell just a little bit about the history? Who are the members? And just tell us a little bit more about American Meat Science Association in general.
Deidrea, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can. So American Meat Science Association, actually the Reciprocal Meat Conference has been around longer than AMSA has. So RMC is going to be in its 73rd year this coming 2021. And so when the Meat and Livestock Board kind of went its different ways, AMSA was formed as the association to oversee the Reciprocal Meat Conference because it was such a great summer meeting that brought together people from all different aspects of the industry to really talk about what's going on, what's the main focus, what research needs to take place, and then what we need to do looking forward. So I've actually been an active member of AMSA since graduate school and then working for 13 years. So we've really grown our membership. As far as diversity, the different people without the industry and academia roles that are part of AMSA. So we kind of, touch all different branches of it. So it's a lot of great members. We're about 2,300 members to date. Of those, we have about close to 1,000 students that are actively studying anything in the meat, animal science, food science area. We have members that represent about 38 different countries. So we're not just here within the United States and Canada, we're also an international organization. So just always trying to bring research to the forefront, talk about what's going on in the meat science community, and then help, prepare our younger student members and the next generation for careers in the meat industry.
And
so, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add sort of a little bit of color, a visual to what Deidrea said, which since you have people that are listening who don't know what this funny sounding name is, the Reciprocal Meat Conference, and the first time that it occurred was in 1948. So picture post World War II. And I know you guys have seen the historical pictures because we're all very proud of the tradition and the history of the organization, but visualize a bunch of, very early scientists working in this field, a fairly small group sitting around and discussing really key developments. And if you think about where the industry was at that time, as far as learning about cold chain controls, packaging, vacuum packaging, boxing, the movement of the meat plants from the urban areas to the rural areas, understanding sensory traits, integrating it with genetics, the list goes on. And like Deidrea, I started in grad school, and I remember once I got smart enough to figure out who some of these people were, just kind of being in awe of going to these meetings and seeing all the names that I would see in the scientific literature, especially related to some of the key review research articles and that kind of thing. So it has a rich history and a funny name, but we try to still honor the reciprocation part of it. I mean, essentially that's what we're doing today, right? So you can rename podcasts, you can call them, Recipcasts or something like that.
Well, and it's so cool too that, like you said, it's a small, it was a small group then, and it still feels like a small group, even though I can't believe the numbers that Deidrea just mentioned, 2,300 members out there. That's absolutely incredible.
And I guess for those folks that don't know, so this summer you guys, AMSA held the International Meat Science Meeting, and I guess I cannot stress enough how important that was in terms of the first ever virtual meeting. And I think how was working with people around the globe, having meeting at certain times, and then maybe in New Zealand, maybe in South America. How was that in terms of putting all that together? Because seeing it and watching all the show from my screen, it looked like perfect, but I can't imagine the hard work that you guys put into this.
I have to say this first, Deidrea. Once Deidrea got over her broken heart and faced the reality of the fact that we were not going to Disney World for this meeting, and that more than 5 years of her life that had been spent planning this meeting, once she got over that, then I'll let her tell the story of how she put together a totally awesome virtual meeting for the whole world.
Yes. I don't even know if truly today I'm still over it. Like, I still think back, like last week, we were like a year ago, this time last year, we were in Orlando planning what was to be in person. So, and earlier I said Reno is 73rd, and it's actually the 74th. We just hosted the 73rd RMC with the ICOMPS this past August in that virtual meeting. So kind of, to address your first question, it was pretty fascinating. So for 5 years, we planned this meeting. We had scientists, meat scientists, people in all different aspects of research all over the world coming in to speak. And we actually did not lose one of our international speakers. So we were able to pre-record a lot of the presentations because we had speakers in 20 different countries, and trying to put everybody in a time zone was a little bit chaotic. So we went ahead and pre-recorded everything. So just hearing the research, because I actually personally recorded every presentation. So just the enthusiasm they have for the industry, even though we were all worldwide in the middle of a pandemic, just that the focus they had, the excitement they had for their research, and the excitement they had for the meeting was pretty, just kind of energized you. So the late nights and the early mornings and the long hours to pull it all together, just was kind of a small bump in the road just to pull it off. We ended up with 850 members that attended virtually. Wow. And so then by pre-recording it, once the live sessions were done, we were able to post those recordings. So as we were ending our meeting and our attendees in Australia were waking up, they could go on our online meeting portal and see all the presentations that we had just had. So it was a lot of work and a lot of thinking outside the box of how to make it all kind of come together. And, it's one of those things I think we're pretty proud of, and we know how to do it. We hope moving forward, we don't have to have a fully virtual meeting, but just understanding that, in a time when everybody came together, super excited to be part of it. And then the cool thing that we didn't really anticipate. So as we played the presentations that were pre-recorded live, the speakers were actually on the webinar with all the attendees. And so as attendees were asking questions, the speakers were answering those questions in live right at the moment they got asked. So then that really had more, there was more interaction, there was more questions, there was more thought ideas that were kind of provoked from that. So it was pretty cool to watch the chat function happen while the presentation streamed, and just the networking and the connections that people made. So it was, it was a lot of time and a lot of energy put into it, but definitely well worth it in the end.
For those who don't, go ahead. Oh,
Collette. I was just going to say, just to add, one thing to that, Francisco, to your point, is that it did allow, so lessons were learned that will probably be used going forward. And it did allow people all over the world to listen to it in their own time, and not to have to dedicate, the time, the travel, the wear and tear, the cost, all of that kind of thing. And to Deidrea's point about the chat, it let people, you indicated that you have to do simultaneous translation sometimes. It let people who maybe weren't comfortable standing up in a room and asking a question in front of everybody, which we all have felt that feeling, right? Like, should I ask, are they going to come to me with the microphone? Well, when you can just chat, type it in the chat box, and you can kind of think about what you say, then we got many more questions, many more comments, a lot of positive feedback about being able to interact that way in a very real time. And that's something that Deidrea won't tell us about herself, but she's actually been asked to advise probably 6 or 8 different groups now who are selecting virtual delivery platforms. And so I'm trying to keep her from going off on some kind of high dollar consulting role. That's why I want the pandemic to hurry up and end also, so that, I get to keep Deidrea. But anyway, she did such a great job of pulling that off and researching it that she has helped several organizations kind of think through the different aspects of it.
Well, and folks that don't know these two ladies don't realize just how hardworking individuals they are, and folks who haven't joined us, our little AMSA family at our family reunions, as I call them every year, the RMC, don't realize just how flawless things go. And it's been, so this year would have been my 15th year as a member attending an RMC. And I remember all the years prior of a bit smaller group, and we continue to grow, yet I think the programming just keeps getting better and better. You guys are just really tuned into what the audience is looking for. The transition from one event to the next during that entire time is absolutely incredible. And I want to throw out there, I want to ask you a couple questions. Okay. First and foremost, because you've mentioned it a couple times now, the surprising successes of having the online option for RMC and ICOMS. And ICOMS is the International Congress of Meat Science and Technology. It's the big international version and connection that AMSA connects with. So, but do you think that we'll have an online option going forward? And I'm not saying it's all online, but an online option going forward. And can you talk about some of the other cool programs that AMSA provides to the membership?
So definitely a conversation we've had. And as we came out of ICOMS, we, basically our language became hybrid. Nothing can take away from that in-person meeting, that networking on site. But, with the ICOMS that you spoke of, that's a meeting AMSA only hosts about every 10 to 15 years. So it rotates throughout different countries. And we had a lot of people express interest that typically are not AMSA members, that don't come to RMC, that didn't know about the RMC meeting and now want to be engaged. So after that feedback, after ICOMS, we were like, okay, hybrid is going to be moving forward. Now, how much of the program we live stream and provide virtually, that's still to be determined. We're still kind of thinking through that because we're right now in the planning phases of that program. So definitely there'll be a hybrid approach to it. And that's our goal, right? Moving forward, we're in person in Reno. We have that hybrid, that online. And then also with AMSA, we have our Pork 101. So Pork 101 is a program we've had for many years. It's a great program. It started to really help people get an idea of the pork industry. So everything from on-farm production to final products. And it's a 2.5-day course that people can attend and just kind of deep dive in. It's hands-on. They actually do a lot of the harvesting and the fabrication and the making of the products. We have a SALUMI 101 course that's very similar. We've only had it for about 3 years. And then we have a lot of student programmings, whether that's around leadership or product development. So things that can kind of help train students for that career in the industry. We know students, depending on the universities they go to, some get, a really strong background in maybe the fresh or the post-harvest research, whereas you go to other universities, maybe get some more research in the processed meats area. So how can we bring more trainings and more leadership opportunities and more information to students based on the careers that potentially they want to have? So, and then I'll kind of let Collette talk to some of the new things we're thinking of hopefully rolling out in 2021 and beyond as we think about the growth of the members, what our members are asking us to be able to provide. So I'll let her kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so just to, build on sort of the original question was, it'll be hard to walk completely back from these virtual and digital deliveries. But as we were expressing, all of us have been on Zoom calls basically all day, right? I mean, you said you were lucky enough, you got to go down to the meat lab for a while. So yeah. I was not that fortunate. I did run down the hall and get a can of soup, and then I ran right back for another call. So that was the extent of my sensory testing for today. So I think, we have to balance not taking away those hands-on opportunities that we know that are so integral to the way that we teach kids and what people really love about working in the meat industry. I mean, Francisco, I'm sure that, a big part of your memories of grad school, right or wrong, are going to be the long hours that you spent, working on projects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been able to fabricate animals, like do all the harvest process from harvest to processed meats. I think has a lot of value to it. But I think moving forward, I think that having that possibility for some people that might not be able to join at that moment and can benefit from that conversation of that meeting in the future, maybe like in the following weeks, I think has a lot of benefit.
That's exactly right. So the idea is to, not switch completely over, but to be nimble and to be able to go back and forth as we try to figure out, how we get back to the cliche of the new normal. I'm sure and maybe this is jumping ahead to one of your questions, that we had to do meat judging on a hybrid basis. So some teams were allowed to travel and go into the facilities and have that experience, and some teams had to do it virtually. And so we think that this will help directionally. We'll be able to go 2 different ways, right? So we continue having the hands-on. We want to grow that group, but yet we know there are other groups, 4-H, FFA, people who don't have a big judging team budget, kids who don't want to dedicate their lives to standing in a cooler on a Friday night, that might want a little different experience with it. Not us, right? So we
I
think
got
that
my hand in the air. I'm up for it.
we think that it provides options going forward. The other areas that we hear from our membership that we want to help, not just students, but people who are in the early stages of their careers, are the business side of what we do. And so I know that for some professionals like myself who worked in industry, we knew all the meat science terminology. And yes, of course, we'd had business classes, but it's a lot different than when you're sitting in a P&L meeting, or when you're a meat scientist and you're breaking carcasses or working on product costing or cutability projects or yield projects, or formulating a project for a huge brand name like many of our members. So we want to be able to deliver some preliminary materials to people, to teach them some of those skills and to make that tangible. Our student leadership conference does that, but having the virtual platform will let us take some of the teachings that are done for only a small group of people and amplify that to a bigger group. Another good example of a program like that is a program that we actually started when I was on the board in the mid 2000s. And the idea was that big companies can train their FSQA people, food safety, quality assurance people, with really regimented programs, but small companies can't. And so we put together a course similar, a multi-day course similar to, with the idea of like a pork 101. Well, it turns out that small companies can't afford to send their people away for 3 days. They need them at the facility, and they can't incur the cost. So for things like that, the virtual learning is going to be a perfect combination. And maybe you can either decrease the time away, or you can deliver materials in a way that fits with people's schedules. And I have found, both in my role with AMSA and with PAACO, the Animal Auditor Group, that the demand and the interest for continuous education is skyrocketing. So people really have a hunger to learn more and to get the facts too, because we all know there's like a whole barrage of information. And so being a credible group to supply that with the partners that we have at universities such as yourselves, it should be perfect.
You know, I can't recall which one of you mentioned the networking that is available, but gosh, it can never be oversold. The ability to connect the academics with industry, with government. So we have that whole tripartite bit of everyone who's moving the meat industry forward, joining us within the American Meat Science Association. And I think you've already kind of alluded to this, is that, building those connections. But I recall in my short time as a AMSA member that it was a lot more academic focused, but things have changed, and we're seeing definitely still have that very intense scientific connection. But I love seeing that industry relationship being built with AMSA. And I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about how the big picture may look, but bringing those early career folks from industry maybe to AMSA, or connecting the academics with industry so that we can make sure that we're moving forward with the right types of research. But can you talk a little bit more about how AMSA is trying to just continue to be that conduit between academic and industry and governmental entities?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you kind of said a mouthful there, because right now, I don't think there's ever, we have a lot of work to do in that area, all of us, not just AMSA, but we do as the conduit. And the challenges that have been put forth to you guys trying to teach and attend school in this environment are unbelievable, right? And so you are already having to constantly do more with less, right? And then now let's pile on virtual on top of it. So one of the things I want to make sure that AMSA does is that we strike the right balance between our industry partners and our academic lifeblood to research, right? Because you guys are the ones who develop the next Francisco, the students, right? The awesome students that all of our industry partners want to have. And we know that funding gets cut more short. We know that people are more and more urban based and don't know what meat science is. So our ideas are to, and not just ours, but those that have come out even through our strategic plan, through the direction of the board, are to really reach both directions. So back into high schools, 4-H, FFA. Heck, Deidrea just hosted the undersecretary to talk to groups of fifth graders about food safety. I mean, wow. Where else could that happen than with those kinds of connections? So as Deidrea mentioned, Morgan is going to Oklahoma State, and we wish her well, and we're excited for her, and we're sad that she's leaving, but we are going to be filling that role with a director of education and outreach. So a lot of that outreach will happen in a really intentional way. And I think that you'll see a lot more tools being put forward for people to go back and forth into those areas, and for us reaching out additionally to students and schools that maybe don't normally participate in American Meat Science Association, more junior colleges, more trade schools, colleges that have food science or meat science programs but aren't necessarily land grant universities. But how will we do this? The way that we always do, right? By asking our awesome volunteers to step up. And so maybe that's you reaching out to some of the smaller schools in your area, or we just got done talking to the student board about Rachel's working on putting together a really cool PowerPoint to talk about meat science, American Meat Science Association, and the meat industry, so that those student board members or students could go back to their home high school, to their FFA groups, or maybe the 4-H group that they were part of, and present this information with the idea of showing kids of that age, one, how cool the meat industry and how it's not all the things that people think about us, and two, all the opportunities that are out there as they go into you know, some of them are going into ag majors without even knowing what's out there. And so we're going to try to work in a lot of different directions.
And following up on Phil's statement on that triangle that I want to put a triangle, you have the government, you have academia, and you have the meat industry, the private sector. I think I have a very unique example during my experience. I met Dr. Kevin Myers. He's at Hormel, and I think during one conference, I cannot remember which one it was, but I was eager to meet him because he was gonna. We sat down for about an hour. I told him about some of my ideas of my research, and there's no better way to know the impact of that research that you're gonna conduct by meeting the leaders in the meat industry, that they know what the needs are from the meat industry. And I think to me, that's one of the main takeaways from also having that in-person meetings, because that way it's easier for us students to come talk to people that have a really important role in their companies. And then you can ask them, hey, would this be impactful for you if we do more research on this or not? So I think that's super viable.
It's pretty cool to be able to walk up to an actual expert, and just ask the questions. And what a generous group that we do have within AMSA to be able to share that information.
Well, for sure. And not only that, but in that, you know, that's a particularly good example, because that particular individual is in a very senior position, yet he takes the time to interact in a really meaningful way with students. And why does he do that? Because he was in your shoes one time, right? And so the idea is that we, lift each other up and mentor. And, as somebody, on the other side of my career from yours, there's nothing more satisfying than watching people that, you've worked with or mentored become successful in their roles. It's one of the coolest things that you can see happen. And then you can watch, all the people that did that for you too. So I was teasing the Emeritite group at the breakfast last year. It was like, I must be getting old if you guys are the ones sitting in this room now, because you have all been, my meat science influencers.
No, they're merely getting younger, Collette.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing what meat can do to the body, right?
That's right. Regeneration.
That's right. Well, and, and something we always like to ask, and I think this is probably a good time to ask this, considering, we're talking about giving back and talking about how we can connect with some amazing folks who have many, many years in experience and specialties with the up and coming leaders in the industry. And so I'd like to ask the question, how did you guys get involved in meat science or in the meat industry? Because Collette, you have an amazing background being both in industry, in the academic world, and now in this kind of hybrid, which is AMSA. So,
I was running with a friend of mine the other day, and she said something. We were talking about our kids being in college, and she said to me, she's like, well, not everybody knows what they want to do and goes and does it when they're in college. And I was like, are you talking about me? Because I said, I guess, Julie, you don't realize that I started off as an art major. And I grew up with my grandparents farming, but my parents didn't farm. We showed horses, and that was kind of like our thing that we did. But my exposure and my love of agriculture really came from working on my grandparents' farm. But I waffled around trying to figure out what I was going to do, and then somehow stumbled back into animal science. And just as the famous story goes, how did you end up in meat science? Meat judging, right? So two things: a mentor who is a professor, Dr. Bill Costello at South Dakota State University, and meat judging. And I always tell people, I think the reason that I gravitated to meat is because everybody had equal parity. So nobody really knew that much about meat, right? Lots of people knew about hog production or beef production. And I was at a disadvantage, but we were all sort of on a level playing field. And I just got into it, and I don't think I ever really looked back. So after that, I was hooked, so to speak.
So yeah, basically, so I grew up, my grandpa had a registered Angus ranch. So I grew up big ambassador for the Angus industry, thought I was going to go to school. I did ag communications and wanted to go just kind of have a public speaking, work in sales, do something ag related. So I always knew ag was a passion. And then I went to school at Texas Tech. That's where I got my undergrad and my master's degree. And for 2 years, Dr. Mark Miller, so he was my main professor there, tried to convince me to judge meats. And I told him, you have to be crazy. Who wants to stand in a cooler for that long and freeze looking at dead carcasses hanging on a rail? Because we didn't have meat judging where I grew up in 4-H and FFA. It was all dairy and livestock judging. So he offered me a scholarship. I accepted. And basically, 13 years later, I'm still working for AMSA. So it kind of ignited, kind of like Collette, basically meat judging brought me to it. Once you got in it, you met all these great people that were really down to earth. They're super awesome to hang out with and talk to. You could ask them anything. And then I did my master's under Dr. Mindy Brashears, who's the Undersecretary of Food Safety currently with USDA. And she kind of sparked a whole different world about food safety and pathogens. And so in my master's degree, I think I completed 14 different research projects in pathogen studies. And then basically Jimmy Wise, who is past AMSA, ran our meat judging program and retired from the USDA, called me and said, AMSA has the job open and you should apply. So basically Dr. Miller brought me into it, and then Dr. Jimmy Wise basically helped me get my job 13 years ago. So here I am.
kind of a cast of characters there.
It is definitely.
But in our meat world, these are movie stars.
For sure.
These folks are, still, you see these guys walk into the room. Gary Smith, oh my gosh, he's in the room. And sometimes quite literally movie stars. Temple Grandin makes appearances at times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she's a movie star, but they've made a movie about her. So, clearly this is an impactful group that, gosh, we just need more and more people to get to know and connect with. And so I'd like to ask, I want to ask just one more question, and then I'll stop asking questions. But for those non-members out there or folks that are listening in, if they want to learn more, how would you have them learn more about AMSA and possibly connect with other meat scientists?
Ideally in a normal year, shall we say, the greatest thing would be to have them get involved in one of these activities that we're talking about, first at their university level, and then potentially, coming to compete in one of the offerings that we're doing at RMC. So Iron Chef, meat judging, quiz bowl, all of those kind of things are a good way to kind of dip your toe in the water and then look around, as I'm sure you did, Francisco, and go, oh, this looks like a pretty cool thing to be a part of going forward, and to get that introduction.
Definitely. So, and then just, for the listeners, we have a great resource within our website. So meatscience.org, or just, shoot us an email, information@meatscience.org. Let us know what you're interested in. If, you're a student that's kind of looking for a career in the industry, we have tons of mentors at all these different universities that we'll be happy to connect you with. If you're a young professional wanting to get into the meat industry for a job, we have a great career center. So there's all sorts of jobs posted. So if you go to meatscience.org, you can see that job board link. And then, just feel free to reach out. We have a great group. We're a great community. And we always like to connect people back to the meat industry.
Yeah, and probably I'll mention one other thing that has been a byproduct of virtual, and that is very recently for some of the judging team members, we've hosted some listening sessions with 5 or 6 different roles and industry people discussing their different position within the meat industry. And so we've had audit companies, product development, food safety QA, government, all these different examples that we've talked about. And it's easy to do with Zoom, right? Because you can just hop on there and it's 10 minutes of your time instead of, coming to a meeting. So they can get a little bit better of a feel for that. And we'll have more and more of those materials posted on the website too, where they can take a look at that and really sort of get a feel for the types of companies that are out there. As you saw on the platform this summer, there was a great place for people to showcase their companies. And, Jack Links, as a particular example, was able to put up some of the really funny commercials, even in some of the videos as part of it. And people can get to know the brands and the people that are behind those brands and the roles that might be there for them.
Great connections. Francisco, I don't know about you, but I had a fantastic time just listening and learning from these two. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It was awesome. Thank you guys for being here again, and hopefully we see you back soon, sometime next spring.
I hope so.
Definitely.
I hope we get to see you in person the next time, and we very much appreciate the invitation. Enjoy the podcast. You guys have covered a ton of different topics. I was just scrolling through, kind of refreshing my memory, and you guys have definitely covered a bunch of them, and hopefully we can shoot you some ideas for other ones and keep growing the podcast.
Definitely. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We want to thank our sponsors for their leadership and support.